Hello friends and welcome back to Generation Pixel, your one-stop channel for anything gamer, gadget or geek, and today we're going back in time. No, not quite that far back in time, but due to the interest in my last video I thought I'd wheel this boy back out again and show you 3 other games that I picked up of late. So let's get to gameplay. First up, we have The Way of the Exploding Fist, published by Melbourne House in 1985. Now this wasn't the very first one-on-one fighting game, but it certainly is Mortal Kombat's great-great-great-grandfather, at the very least. The gameplay itself for the time was fantastic. It wasn't a simple button basher. There was no way you could just move towards your opponent and rapidly hit the fire button or a fire button to execute hit after hit to try and pummel your opponent into submission. No, this was a tactical karate game. You had to slowly move forward, try to judge what your opponent was going to do and execute your own move according to that guess. Being as such, the control system was quite complicated for the time. Now if you had a joystick, it was slightly easier, but if you didn't, then you were left with a keyboard, which would mean you had 9 keys to master. You had up, down, left and right, but you also had up left, up right, down left, down right, with a fire button to execute whatever move you were trying to pull off. And of course, the goal of the game was simply to beat your opponent. But unfortunately, if you beat your opponent, all that happened was you increased your karate rank, and the goal of the game ultimately was to reach 10th Dan. Of course, I never made it to 10th Dan, but that didn't stop me from trying over and over again, and it's a game that I can return to today quite happily. Also in 1985, US Gold brought us Beachhead, the military arcade strategy game. In Beachhead you started off on the enemy coastline, and your first task was to guide your fleet of ships right up to the enemy's front line. Now as with most Spectrum games and other home microcomputer games, this game was split into various different sections of gameplay. You have to remember that the computing power back then wasn't quite what it is today, so programmers had to employ every trick at their disposal to make an engaging game. Now the first level of Beachhead, which is totally skippable, is to sail your ships up the north end of the coast, then try and guide them through a heavily booby-trapped maze of caverns. Well, I say maze, but it was a straight line, but the programmers made the most of what they had to work with. After guiding your ships through, you were straight to the front line, and took control of your 2 40mm cannons, leaving you the task of shooting down the enemy aircraft that were trying to bomb your fleet. After successfully taking down the planes, you then had to move on and take out the ships that were in your way. And to do so, it was just merely a case of finding the right degree of elevation to land your shots on the enemy ships. Upon successful completion of that, you made your way onto the beach itself. Your tanks had trundled off the ships and were making their way up towards the enemy stronghold, and that's where you would meet your final challenge, in the form of the enemy citadel. This was similar to the naval battle, where you had to guess the right degree of elevation to take out the weak points on the citadel. If you didn't do so in time, the citadel's massive gun would wipe out your tank in one shot. If you had enough tanks, however, it could be done, and with that final shot, you would be victorious and your enemy would surrender, waving a white flag above his head. For the third and final game, I'm going to give you Bruno Boxing, published by Elite, and just take a look at it, and I'm sure there's a few Nintendo fans out there going, wait a minute, that's just Punch-Out. Now, I want to remind you of the last 2 games in the year that they were released, and this game was also released in 1985, 2 whole years before Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. So I think it's safe to say that in this case, that the microcomputers of the 80s, of the early 80s, without a doubt inspired Nintendo for one of their most popular and successful games of the time. And as you watch the gameplay, you can see it is exactly Punch Out. You're looking over the shoulder of your fighter. He can punch left, he can punch right, he can dodge left, he can dodge right. All the mechanics are there, and even the progression in the game itself is almost identical, moving on from one boxer from one country or region to another boxer from another one, until you make your way to the final round and take on the champ. So there you have it, folks, another 3 classic games added to my ZX Spectrum collection, and I hope you enjoyed watching them as much as I enjoyed playing them. Now drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you want to see more. But most importantly, drop a comment. Tell me, did you know what the Spectrum was? Did you even know that games came on cassette tapes? Anything, I will get back to you, I promise. But for today, before we finish, this one here, I will be coming back to this in a later video, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Anyway, until next time, thank you very much for watching, and bye!